Hello, everyone. It's Leslie Flowers, Trailblazer for Women in Business. And this is the Awakening Your Infinite Potential Telesummit. And today we have most wonderful presenter, Jenny Berk. I can't wait for you to meet her. In a culture, Jenny says, obsessed with food and the ideal body image, she offers women and men the chance to experience body love, pleasure eating food again, greater self esteem, and acceptance of ourselves as we are. Her work focuses on healing our often fraught relationship with our bodies and tuning into intrinsic wisdom to really learn how to nourish ourselves naturally and joyfully. For that, I like that. Her own journey of body blame and food fear led her on a path of healing that inspired her to write her best-selling book, The Body Image Blueprint. She earned her master's in psychology and education from the University of Pennsylvania and later her certificate in eating psychology coaching and mindful eating. Jenny resides in Boston with her husband, three spirited daughters, and two kittens. When she's not coaching, she loves to travel, hike, cook, and entertain, and spend time with good friends and family, and languish over a delicious meal and a deep talk. I love that. Welcome, Jenny.
Thank you, Leslie. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's exciting. And so, why don't you begin with sharing with us how you came upon your awakening of your infinite potential, please?
Yes. Well, thank you so much for letting me share my story. And I have to say, there are lots of micro awakenings along the way. And let me just set the stage for you. So, I was a chronic dieter. I grew up in a household, a very loving household, with my mom as a chef, a skinny chef, if you will, who made amazing, delicious food. And food was love in my household. I knew that from the second I ever touched like a bite of her food. And yet, I grew up in the 80s and 90s where there was this groundswell of dieting, Weight Watchers and cabbage soup diet and the Scarsdale diet. And we all got swept up in the trends of that time. And I had very mixed messages regarding who I was, what my body was meant to look like. And on the one hand, I was told the message, you got to be thin, you got to eat healthy, you've got to exercise, you've got to diet because being in a smaller body is good and dieting is good. And I don't know if that was from my family, I don't know if it was from my peers or from society at large, but that was really ingrained in me. And I consider it my indoctrination into dieting. And yet I had this other voice. So imagine this other voice. We all have it. I know the listeners out there have it. That's saying to them, you're enough. You're okay. You're beautiful. Why do you need to do that? Why do you need to bully yourself just to meet some arbitrary ideal that may not even be true? But for a long time, I squelched that voice and I did whatever I could to diet and bully my body and over exercise and try in vain over and over and over again to meet that ideal. Because I thought, as we all do, that that's where happiness is. That's where success is. That's where admiration lies. That's how I'll be desired. That's how I'll be accepted. And that's how I'll belong. And it was that fear, as opposed to trust, that led me into a path of, multiple aggressive dieting stints, which always worked, but left me angst-ridden with no exit plan, no sustainable plan. And guess what? I was miserable. I wasn't happy. Even at my lowest weight, I wasn't happy. So, I call it deja vu dieting because I would turn around and be like, oh, here I am again. Here are those carrot sticks. Here's that treadmill. Like, when's this madness going to end? And I ended up working at a national health and weight management company, ironically, helping other people to lose weight. And here I was inside struggling and feeling like there was a huge spotlight on me that I had to rise above and show everybody, like, look, I can lose weight, and that's how I can teach you to. And this is the most important thing. And over time, I started to get really wary about that. And this other voice started to bubble up to the surface, the one that said, no, stop doing this. Stop telling other people to do this. This isn't the right path. Why are people not enough the way they are? And why am I, subscribing to this society that believes the only way you can be happy is if you restrict your calories, eat 800 calories a day, loathe your body, bully your body. And I just said, this is enough. And I started to wonder what's underneath all of this. Like, why are people so called to overeat and to binge eat and to hate their bodies? What's underneath all that? And the final straw, which is what I call my awakening, is really, I was so miserable because I couldn't lose weight anymore. I turned 40. I couldn't lose weight. I figured I had to redouble my efforts here, okay, that's not going to work. I'm going to do this. And I went to see a doctor who told me, okay, you need to get rid of dairy. You need to get rid of gluten. You need to get rid of tomatoes and peanuts. And all of a sudden I'm like, okay, if that's what it's going to take, I'll do it. And I pushed through with blinders on for an entire year because I was already a vegetarian. So I remember very clearly doing this for a year, feeling miserable, my worst that I ever felt. And we had this wonderful block party at my neighborhood. And there was a huge pizza there. In fact, there were multiple pizzas there. And I remember, in the throes of deprivation and misery, I went into that pizza. It was like all the dairy and gluten I could consume in like one moment. And I was just like, gobble, gobble, gobble. And then I'm like, this is insane. And it was right there and then that I knew something had to change. And so there were several steps that I took.
So hold on a second. So it was that pizza. It was the automatic, without thinking, desperation for that food that had you actually eating it before you were aware of it.
That's right. And it was that very act of restriction for so long. And remember, the underlying idea behind it was, well, you're not good enough. You have to lose weight. Therefore, you have to not have gluten and not have dairy and not do this and not do that. And I was like stripped away of all the pleasure in my life. And in that moment, you're absolutely right. There was no thinking. It was just thought response. Boom. And I feel like this is what a lot of women go through when they're in the throes of dieting. There's like, it's almost like ricochets to the other direction where you're like, you can only take so much before willpower throws you under the bus. And you're like, forget this. This is annoying. This is ridiculous. And all of a sudden that voice was like right front and center. And I'm like, you know what? First step, I've got to start listening to this voice because this voice has wisdom. This voice knows. This voice is intuitive. And I've been drowning it out, listening to other people tell me how to eat, tell me how to move, tell me how much to weigh. And I'm done. I'm done with it. And I wanted to see if I could be happy just the way that I am.
So once you had the epiphany, excuse me for interrupting because this is so exciting. So once you had this awakening moment, and you realized that you were done with this because you had a deep insight, right, about it, what did you do next?
The very first thing I did was throw away my scale. I threw it away. I was like, I'm not weighing myself anymore. I'm not going to let a scale tell me how much worth I have today, what kind of mood I'm going to be in today. I'm not going to let empirical data trump my own intrinsic wisdom about my worthiness, about my beauty, about anything else. I'm not going to let it happen anymore. So that was the very first step. And the next step was to tune inward. I had turned outward for so long. Trust this doctor, trust that expert, trust this diet. This person says don't eat after 6. Oh, well, this person says eat every 4 hours. And this person says, exercise, do, weights. And this one says yoga. And I was so confused and so miserable and so done that I said, what if I was just to trust myself? What if I could tap into my own wisdom, my own inner dietitian, my own inner athlete, and that could tell me what to do next. And the truth is, it's exactly what happened. I went into this path of, I know exactly what to do, and I've known all along, but I haven't given myself the chance to even see what that could feel like. And so the next step that I did was I went on a retreat to Kripalu, which is in the Berkshires. And I used that time to just tune inward and to listen deeply listen in a way that I never had before. And I started to realize that my underlying foundation is healthy eating. I love healthy food. My underlying foundation is food is love. Remember that. My mom was a chef and we had these amazing meals, and I wanted to tap back into that. And I said to myself, I'm going to start bringing awareness and pleasure to my eating experience. And I started to go on this path of mindful and intuitive eating. And the wisdom, the breakthroughs that I got from that was unparalleled to anything I'd ever done 41 years prior to that. And I really feel like that was my awakening. Why? Because once I let go of dieting culture, once I let go of the idea that I'm not enough unless I weigh a certain amount, fit into a certain size, pants, who was I if I wasn't dieting? Who was I if I wasn't pursuing a smaller body? And I needed to find out who that was. And I say this all the time, but like, there is no way I would have been able to write a book had I been counting every calorie, weighing myself every 3 hours, exercising 3 hours a day, 2 hours a day, obsessing about what I was going to eat next. I didn't have any bandwidth or space left to do the great things that I'm meant to do and to tap into that potential that I knew I had. I couldn't do it. There was no time, there was no energy, there was no bandwidth. And once I let go of that and I truly released it and said, I'm listening, I'm really listening, the skies opened up. There was immense abundance and expansiveness for me. And I never looked back. And I left my job. I started my own business that's thriving. I wrote my best-selling book, and I've never been happier. So, I mean, for me, it was truly an awakening. And now I feel like I have the potential. I have the ability to seek out and really tap into that potential, and I know it's there. And I know that I'm not even fully there yet. I know that there's more for me and that I can bring my creativity and I can trust myself again and I can listen and I can bring respect to this vessel that I have. And I started to bring a whole bunch of gratitude, which wasn't there before. It was just blame and anger and frustration and exhaustion. And now it's like, ooh, what can I do next? Like, I can do this, I can do that, I can do this. There's creativity has started to come out, like writing, and like I realized I love marketing, and I started to jump into that, and I started to love deeper. I started to be more present for my children. I mean, you cannot trade that for any diet or for any like size 2 jeans or whatever it is. There's nothing greater than that feeling of
I agree, and I want to ask you a question. So you let go of a belief system which took your whole life to embed itself in your subconscious mind, if you will. So when you declared and had your awakening moment that you were going to tune in and do mindful eating, I'm curious to know what you told yourself the first time you sat down to something that was formerly a big no-no. Because those beliefs are strong, and letting go is one thing, but isn't it a practice? And isn't it something you have to remind yourself? So if that's the case, what was the experience like the first time you actually let go and didn't feel guilty and had given yourself permission to eat what you want?
Oh, it's such a great question, Leslie, and something that comes up a lot now that I teach others how to do this. And the first thing was I realized I was in a stress response while I was eating. I realized like I was too conflicted and there was too much morality on the table for me to even allow pleasure to come in, because it was too tinged with, oh my gosh, well, what's that going to mean? And am I going to overeat? Am I going to binge? Am I going to gain weight tomorrow? And so I had to confront that and actually feel that and recognize like, oh, this is the block all along. It's that I'm not even relaxed. How can I possibly be aware and fully embodied in my body and bring pleasure when I have so many faulty beliefs around this food, right? Around myself, around this food. So like whether it was a cookie or chocolate or whatever, I forget what it was, but I remember just letting myself get into a relaxation response and to say, okay, these are my beliefs. These are the fears that I have around this food. And let's be curious. Let's bring inquiry into this because it doesn't have to mean what I think it means all along, right? So I bit into it and I ate it really slowly and I used all my senses. As the funniest thing, I didn't even like it. I think it was chocolate. Like I think it was Halloween candy. And I was like, this isn't even that good. I get to break up with you. That's amazing, you know? And it was this like huge, like, wow, like I believed it so much that I didn't like, who could I be if I didn't actually like Reese's peanut butter cups or whatever it was? And then I was like, but that's so powerful because now I get to be judicious about what I'm really going to love to eat and what I can just say, I don't need this right now. And
so when you're relaxed, you have a different taste for food than when you're tense, is what I'm hearing.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And, you know, sometimes we're not even conscious or even like embodied enough to know how we're even feeling. And, you know, very oftentimes when I work with people who are binge eaters or who are emotional eaters, they are somewhat dissociated from their bodies. They're up here. They're not here. So their bodies aren't giving them the signals, their taste buds, their palate, they're not giving them. All they're doing is operating from what their belief systems are or what they think they are, right?
And you said something really important, I think, when you said you became really present because we get so many messages and ideas and so many sensual distractions every day. When you were talking about how you approach that food to give yourself permission, I got a real sense that you got very consciously present to what was in front of you. So it was mindful rather than mindless. Is that accurate?
Oh, yes. It was all about mindfulness and tuning into without like not being attached to any outcome, just what is on my plate? What's going on here? How's my body feel? How did this food get to my plate? Like I started to tap into gratitude. Like I'm so lucky to have this food, you know, like it was just a whole paradigm shift from how I viewed food before. I would eat standing up. I would eat super fast, especially if it was like a trigger food or like a bad food. I would eat it so fast that, you know, because maybe if I did it fast, maybe it didn't happen. Or like, and then I started to think how ridiculous that is. Like if I'm going to eat something that I think that I love, why am I snarfing it down? Why am I not enjoying it? It's totally besides the point. And, you know, all I can say is that I marvel in it every day. I marvel in the trust that I have in my body to give me the cues that I need. I marvel that I can leave a plate half eaten and save the rest for later. I was never able to do that because the diet might start Monday. So I better eat it all now, right?
You know, and something else you said that is really insightful for me, and I suspect those listening. So you said just a minute ago, I get to break up with you relating to food. And I actually had that same experience when I would diet, that it was like letting go of a lover, right? And I also have that same kind of relationship with money, right? So you've disappointed me, right? Where were you when I needed you? So it's very interesting to me that you felt that you had a relationship with food that you could break up with, right? And you could do the same thing, I guess, with money or anything else. Poverty as opposed to an abundant mindset. But that is being present. And I love that. So tell me, how do you help people that are on this verge, that are on this roller coaster, because this is your work, So do you have, maybe this relates to your handout and the download that you're
Yes.
getting. What is it that you would tell us to do to begin this process for ourselves? Not only the eating part, but also honoring and acknowledging those awakening moments and all the way up to the inquiry you got in,
Mm-hmm.
right? You began to search within rather than the outside conditions and circumstances. So how will you and your handout help those either find their awakening moment and take their first steps, and or create a whole new relationship with mindful eating?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And, I just so appreciate you because everything that you're saying, I can tell that you truly get it on a very deep level. And it feels really good to speak with somebody, even, whether it's your challenge is money or with food or with your body or something else, that there's still steps that you can take that are universal, really, really. And when we think about being in a relationship with something or someone, there are three things that we have to really tap into. One is trust, one is communication, and one is respect, right? Those are three foundational parts of a relationship. And I realized I didn't have any of those with myself. I wasn't communicating well.
Wait, I'm writing that down. Hold on. Really good.
I wasn't communicating. I wasn't listening. I didn't trust my body. I knew better than my body. Like if I was hungry, well, it's 4 o'clock. I shouldn't be hungry. I need to be hungry at 6. So I wasn't trusting and I wasn't respecting my body. And you can apply those same three qualities to anything, whether it's the food or money or your real relationships or your relationship with yourself or with food or anything else. And what I would say is that the first thing that you need to do is stop, look, and listen. Really. I call it an awakening because it's almost like, in politics, they call it being woke, like waking up to something that you realize that you've been thinking all along that actually might not be true. And the first way to do that is to actually stop, look, and listen. Like look around. What's going on in your environment? What's going on in your body? Like we're so always like immediately like stimuli response. We just immediately act, right? And we don't take that time to just slow down. Sometimes you need to slow down to speed up, if you will, and just to like notice what's going on around you, notice what's going on inside you. And I know that seems so simplistic, but it's so powerful just to doing that one thing. And that's always where I start with people is like, let's find out what's going on with you. Let's find out, what's in your environment that might be causing you stress that you're internalizing without even knowing it. And then it's showing up in your relationship with food. Because oftentimes how we do life is how we do food,
And that's how we do everything.
Yes.
Really.
Yes.
So tell us about your handout and how that will help us move forward.
Yes, great. So this is a 7-day mindful eating intensive. And what it does, it gives you the what, why, and how. So why, what is it? Why do we do it? I'll talk a little bit about the history of fast food and why, how we sort of came to be a fast food nation. And then we get into some of the, like get in the trenches about really actionable step-by-step things that you can do starting today.
Good.
To have a healthier, more balanced, mindful, and intuitive relationship with food. So I give you very specific steps to get started.
I love that. And then, of course, in your handout, there'll be a way for them to reach you, right?
Of course, yes.
And so if they wanted to reach out to you right now, Jenny, what would be the best way?
Visit my website. I guess that's the best way. I have everything on there. It's www.jennyeden, as in the garden of, coaching.com. www.jennyedencoaching.com.
I love that. And I especially appreciate the time you've given us today. I think that those listening can really relate to what you're talking about. I love that you did 1 or 2 steps, because I know for me, if I'm confused, I'm not going to take any action. But if you give me 1 or 2 steps, I can do that. And I will do that. If you give me too many, I get confused. So I really appreciate how you walked us through this and how you actually made it not only possible for us to become present and for me to become present to what I'm eating and whether I'm relaxed or tense. I never heard that before, but it's so true. And that you're willing to share the 7-day plan with everyone so that we can have a kickstart. So this has just been phenomenal. And I know everyone will just enjoy this so much. Jenny, thank you so much for being here and trading hours and time from your day to share with our listeners.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. I loved our time together.
Thank you. All right, my dear.